I'd been working at Barrett & Associates for 5 years, climbing my way up from administrative assistant to junior account manager through pure determination. That Friday was supposed to be just another day at the office, finish my quarterly reports, have lunch with my colleague Megan, and head home to spend a quiet evening with my husband, Jake. At least that's what I thought until I stepped through our front door. Surprise! The chorus of voices made me drop my purse. Our modest suburban home in Westfield, New Jersey had been transformed. Streamers hung from the ceiling fan, balloons clustered in every corner, and there, standing in the centre of our living room, was a crowd of familiar faces grinning at me. My 35th birthday wasn't until tomorrow, and I'd honestly thought everyone had forgotten. "Happy birthday, babe," Jake whispered in my ear as he hugged me from behind. My husband of 7 years, with his kind brown eyes and prematurely greying temples, had somehow organised all this without my knowledge. I felt a rush of love for him that almost brought tears to my eyes. I scanned the room, taking in the faces of my closest friends, a few co-workers, and Jake's family. His mother, Patricia, was there with her typical forced smile. We'd never quite connected. She'd always found me too career-focused for her traditional sensibilities. Jake's father, Robert, stood beside her, genuinely happy as always, the peacemaker of the family. And then I saw her, Melissa, Jake's younger sister, standing by the kitchen entrance with a champagne flute in her manicured hand. 29, unmarried, and perpetually between jobs, Melissa had always relied on her parents' generosity. The expression on her face wasn't one of celebration, it was something else, something calculating. "Come on in, birthday girl, we've got your favourite cake from Carlo's Bakery." My friend Tara guided me further into the room. The evening progressed with food, drinks, and the warmth of conversation. I found myself relaxing, grateful for this gathering of people who cared about me. Jake had ordered catering from my favourite Italian restaurant, Bella Napoli. The smell of garlic bread and pasta sauce filled the air, mixing with the scent of the flowers arranged on our dining table. It was around 9 p.m. when I noticed Melissa whispering something to Jake near the hallway. His face changed, first confusion, then something like alarm. He shook his head and walked away from her, but she followed, still talking in hushed tones. A few guests noticed the interaction, their eyes darting between the siblings before quickly looking away. "Everything okay?" I asked when Jake returned to my side, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Of course," he said, squeezing my hand. Just Melissa being Melissa. But something felt off. The air in the room had shifted, like the moment before a summer storm. Several guests were now looking at me with strange expressions. Was that pity I detected? Patricia approached us, her thin lips pressed together. "Melissa says she needs to make an announcement. I told her now isn't the time, but you know how she is." Before Jake could respond, Melissa tapped a fork against her glass. The chatter died down, and all eyes turned to her. She stood there in her designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary, her blonde hair falling in perfect waves around her shoulders. "I'd like to make a toast to the birthday girl," she said, her voice carrying across the room. Her words were slurring slightly. She'd clearly had more than a few drinks. "To Claire, my hard-working sister-in-law, always at the office, always climbing that corporate ladder." Jake moved beside me. "Melissa, that's enough." "No, let me finish," she insisted, raising her glass higher. "I think it's time everyone knew the truth about what happens when Claire is so focused on her precious career." My stomach dropped. The room went completely silent. "Melissa!" Patricia hissed, but her daughter ignored her. "While Claire has been putting in all those late nights at the office, my brother has been lonely, very lonely." She paused, her eyes locking with mine. "So lonely that he found comfort elsewhere. Should I tell them who with, Jake, or would you like to do the honours?" The room seemed to spin. I looked at Jake, whose face had drained of colour. He was staring at his sister with a mixture of fury and horror. "That's enough," Robert said firmly, stepping forward to take Melissa's arm. "You've had too much to drink." But the damage was done. Whispers rippled through the room. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow. Dozens of eyes were on me, watching for my reaction to whatever bomb Melissa had just dropped. "Is it true?" I asked Jake quietly, my voice barely audible. His silence was my answer. I felt my world begin to crumble beneath my feet. The birthday party I never wanted had just become the stage for a revelation I never expected. One that would change everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my family, and the life I'd built with such care. "Claire, please, let me explain." Jake followed me into our bedroom where I'd fled after Melissa's announcement. The party had disintegrated quickly, guests making awkward excuses to leave while avoiding eye contact with me. Now only Jake's family remained downstairs, no doubt having a heated discussion about what had just transpired. I was shaking as I sat on the edge of our bed, the same bed we'd bought together 3 years ago from that little furniture store in Montclair. I stared at the wedding photo on our dresser. Us laughing on the beach at Cape May, so in love and full of hope. "What is there to explain, Jake? Your sister just announced to all our friends and family that you've been cheating on me." My voice sounded hollow, unrecognisable. He ran his hands through his hair, pacing back and forth on the soft grey carpet I'd spent weeks choosing. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" "Because right now, I'm thinking my husband betrayed me, and his sister decided my birthday party was the perfect time to let me know." Jake sat beside me, keeping a careful distance. I could smell his familiar cologne, the one I'd given him last Christmas, and it made my heart ache. "I made a mistake," he admitted, his voice cracking. "It was just once, about 4 months ago, that business trip to Chicago. Remember how there was that snowstorm and I got stuck there for an extra 2 days? I nodded numbly. I'd been worried about him during that storm, calling to check if he was safe in his hotel while I worked late finalising the Johnson account. There was a conference dinner, too much to drink, and... He trailed off, unable to meet my eyes. "Who?" The question burned my throat. Jake hesitated. "It doesn't matter. It meant nothing. It was over as soon as it happened, and I've been sick with guilt ever since." "It matters to me," I insisted. My hands clenched into fists in my lap. "Who was it?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "It was Amber from the Denver office," he finally said. "She was at the conference too." Amber. I'd met her once when she visited our branch, young, vibrant, with a carefree laugh and no mortgage or career pressures weighing her down. Everything I used to be before responsibility took over. "How did Melissa find out?" I asked, trying to piece together this nightmare. Jake sighed heavily. "Amber sent a text last month, saying she was being transferred to our office and was looking forward to seeing me again. Melissa saw the notification pop up on my phone when I was helping Mum and Dad move some furniture. She confronted me, threatened to tell you unless... Unless what, Jake?" He looked ashamed. "Unless I convinced my parents to give her the down payment for that condo she wants in Hoboken. $50,000. The pieces clicked into place. Melissa's sudden interest in real estate, her comments about finally settling down at Sunday dinners. She'd been planning this, using her brother's mistake as leverage. "Did you give her the money?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "No. I told her I'd talk to Mum and Dad, but I kept putting it off. I was trying to figure out how to tell you myself, but I was a coward." He reached for my hand. But I pulled away. "Claire, please. It was one terrible mistake. I love you. Only you." Downstairs I could hear raised voices, Melissa and Patricia arguing, Robert trying to mediate as usual. "I think you should go," I said quietly. "Stay at your parents' tonight. I need space." "Claire, please." "Jake, I can't look at you right now without seeing you with her." He stood slowly, defeat evident in the slump of his shoulders. "I'll go. But this isn't over. We can work through this. 7 years, Claire. That has to count for something." After he left, I sat alone in our bedroom, surrounded by the life we'd built together. Photos from our trip to Yellowstone last summer. The vintage record player he'd restored for my birthday 3 years ago. The quilt his grandmother had made for us as a wedding gift. I picked up my phone and saw a flood of text messages from friends who'd been at the party. Words of concern, offers of support, expressions of shock. but none of them could fix what had been broken tonight. My thoughts turned to Melissa. This wasn't just about Jake's infidelity, it was about her calculated cruelty. She could have told me privately, she could have confronted her brother. Instead, she'd chosen public humiliation, leveraging her knowledge for financial gain. As tears finally began to fall, I realised my marriage wasn't the only relationship that had been irreparably damaged tonight. The entire family dynamic had shifted, and I wasn't sure if anything would ever be the same again. I called in sick to work on Monday. The thought of facing colleagues who might have heard about the party disaster through the grapevine was too much to bear. Instead, I spent the day in a daze, moving through our empty house like a ghost. Jake had called 17 times over the weekend and left a dozen messages, each more desperate than the last. I'd listened to them all, but couldn't bring myself to respond. His parents had called too, Patricia's voicemail stiff and formal, Robert's warm and genuinely concerned. Nothing from Melissa, of course. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I considered ignoring it until I heard Tara's voice calling through the mail slot. "I know you're in there, Claire. I brought ice cream and I'm not leaving until you open up." I reluctantly opened the door. Tara stood on my porch holding a grocery bag in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. Her curly hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore no makeup, a sign she'd rushed over directly from her home office where she worked as a freelance graphic designer. "You look like hell," she said bluntly, pushing past me into the house. "Thanks for the update," I mumbled, following her to the kitchen. She unpacked her supplies, a pint of Ben & Jerry's chocolate therapy, a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon from that vineyard we'd visited in Napa Valley 2 years ago, and a package of Oreos. "The holy trinity of breakup food," she announced, sliding the ice cream toward me. "We haven't broken up," I said automatically, then paused. "At least I don't think we have." Tara raised an eyebrow as she uncorked the wine. "What's your game plan here? Because the Claire I know always has a plan." I accepted the glass she handed me, taking a long sip before answering. "I don't have one. For the first time in my life, I have absolutely no idea what to do next." "Let's start with the facts," Tara said, practical as always. "Jake cheated, once, according to him. His psycho sister tried to blackmail him, then decided to blow up your marriage at your birthday party when her plan didn't work." Put like that, it sounded like a plot from one of those reality TV shows Tara was addicted to. "That about covers it," I agreed, digging my spoon into the ice cream. "Has Melissa always had it out for you?" Tara asked. I considered the question, thinking back over the 7 years I'd been with Jake. Not always. In the beginning, she was actually friendly, but things changed after Jake and I bought this house. "How so?" She made comments about how her brother was now tied down with a mortgage and a wife. Then when she got laid off from her marketing job 3 years ago, she expected her parents to support her indefinitely. They did at first, but then started encouraging her to find work. She blamed me, said I was influencing them to cut her off. Tara snorted. Heaven forbid a 29-year-old woman support herself. "The thing is," I continued, warming to the subject, "I never said anything to Robert and Patricia about Melissa's finances. They came to that conclusion on their own. So she's been harbouring resentment, waiting for an opportunity to strike," Tara mused. "And Jake's indiscretion handed it to her on a silver platter." The wine was beginning to dull the sharp edges of my pain. "What would you do, if you were me?" Tara took a thoughtful bite of an Oreo. "First, I'd make Jake sweat a little longer, let him feel the full weight of what he's done. Second, I'd figure out what I want. Is this marriage worth saving? Can you trust him again? Third," her eyes gleamed with a hint of mischief, "I'd find a way to make sure Melissa never pulls something like this again." "How exactly would I do that?" I asked, intrigued despite myself. "I don't know yet," Tara admitted, "but that woman needs to learn there are consequences for her actions, and you, my friend, are smart enough to figure out what those should be." Later that night, after Tara had gone, I sat at our dining table with my laptop open, absently scrolling through work emails. One caught my eye, a notification that Amber Reynolds from the Denver office would be transferring to our branch next month. My stomach clenched at seeing her name in black and white, making the affair suddenly more real. Curious, I searched her name in the company directory. Her profile showed a smiling brunette in her late 20s. I studied her face, looking for what Jake might have seen in her that was worth risking our marriage. On impulse, I searched her on social media. Her Instagram was public, filled with hiking photos, cocktails with friends, and selfies at various conferences. I scrolled back 4 months to the Chicago event. There she was, posing in the hotel lobby with a group of colleagues. In the background, partially cropped out but still recognizable, was Jake. I stared at the image, feeling sick. Then I noticed something else. In several of the conference photos, Melissa appeared in the background. According to the location tags, she'd been in Chicago the same weekend as Jake's business trip. My mind raced. Jake had never mentioned his sister being in Chicago. In fact, I distinctly remembered Melissa telling us she was visiting friends in Boston that weekend. I pulled up my text history with Jake from those dates. Sure enough, he'd mentioned the snowstorm, having to extend his stay, being stuck in meetings. Nothing about running into his sister. What if Jake hadn't told me the whole truth? What if Melissa had been involved somehow, not just in revealing the affair, but in orchestrating it? The thought sent a chill through me. I wasn't sure what was worse. Jake cheating of his own accord, or being somehow manipulated by his sister. Either way, there were more pieces to this puzzle than I'd initially realised. I closed my laptop, my mind whirling with questions and the first stirrings of a plan. Tara was right. Melissa needed to learn there were consequences for her actions. But first, I needed to understand exactly what those actions were. For the first time since the party, I felt something other than pain and betrayal. I felt a spark of determination. Whatever game Melissa was playing, she'd chosen the wrong opponent. 3 days after the party disaster, I finally agreed to meet Jake. Not at our home. That space still felt contaminated by betrayal. But at Riverside Park, where we used to walk our dog before he passed away last year. Neutral territory. Jake was already there when I arrived, sitting on our bench overlooking the Hudson River. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same Columbia University sweatshirt he put on when he was stressed. A pang of unwanted sympathy shot through me. "Thank you for coming," he said, as I sat beside him, maintaining careful distance. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted, watching a ferry cut across the water. "But we need to talk." "I know. Claire, I'm so sorry." I held up my hand, stopping him. "I need you to listen first. I have questions, and I need honest answers. Complete honesty, Jake. No matter how painful. That's the only way forward from here." He nodded, his hands clasped tightly between his knees. "Anything. I'll tell you anything you want to know. Did you know Melissa was in Chicago during your business trip?" The question clearly caught him off guard. He blinked, then frowned. "What?" "No, she was in Boston visiting her college roommate." "Are you sure? Because I found photos from the conference." "She's in the background of several of them." Jake's confusion seemed genuine. "That's impossible. Why would she be at a financial services conference? She works in marketing, when she works at all." "That's what I'm trying to figure out," I said. "It seems like too much of a coincidence." He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving quickly across the screen. "Let me see these photos." I showed him the Instagram posts I'd found. His face paled as he recognized his sister in the background of the hotel lobby shot. "I had no idea she was there," he said, his voice hollow. "I swear, Claire, this is the first I'm seeing this." "Did you tell her about the affair?" "Before she saw the text from Amber?" "No, God no. Why would I tell Melissa of all people?" I took a deep breath. "Because I'm starting to think this whole thing was some kind of setup. Melissa conveniently being in Chicago, the affair, her using it as leverage for money, then the public reveal at my party when her plan failed." Jake was silent for a long moment, staring at the phone in his hands. "You think Melissa somehow arranged for me to—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "I don't know what to think anymore," I said honestly. "But the timing is suspicious. And you have to admit, it all worked out very conveniently for her, or it would have if your parents had given her the money." "Jesus," Jake muttered. He looked up at me, his expression tortured. "Claire, I'm not trying to deflect responsibility. What I did was wrong, completely wrong. But I've been asking myself how I could have done something so out of character, so destructive to us. I'm not that guy. I've never been that guy." "What exactly do you remember about that night?" I asked. He ran a hand over his face. "The conference dinner ended around 10. Some people suggested going to the hotel bar for more drinks. I was going to head up to my room, but Amber insisted I join them. She kept buying rounds of shots. Things get fuzzy after that. I remember being in the elevator with her, feeling dizzy, then waking up in her room the next morning, realizing what had happened. A sickening thought occurred to me. Jake, is it possible you were drugged?" His eyes widened. I don't know. I've never blacked out from drinking before. And I didn't have that much, maybe 3 or 4 drinks total over several hours. And Melissa was in Chicago, at the same hotel, without your knowledge. You think my own sister would drug me to facilitate an affair?" The disbelief in his voice was evident, but I could see doubt creeping in. "I think your sister wanted money, and she knew your parents wouldn't just give it to her without good reason." I paused, organising my thoughts. What if she saw an opportunity? She knew we were going through a rough patch, those weeks when I was working late on the Johnson account and we were barely seeing each other. She knew you'd be in Chicago alone. Jake stood up abruptly, pacing in front of the bench. "This is insane. Melissa can be selfish and manipulative, but this would be sociopathic." "Would it really be that surprising?" I asked quietly. "Remember when she told your grandmother that you'd promised to buy her car, so your grandmother gave you the money instead of keeping it for her nursing home expenses? Or when she deliberately spilled wine on my wedding dress at the rehearsal dinner because I wouldn't let her be maid of honor?" Jake stopped pacing. "Those things were petty and selfish. This would be criminal. I'm not saying I know for sure, but doesn't it at least warrant looking into?" He sat back down, closer to me this time. "What are you suggesting?" "I think we need to find out exactly what happened in Chicago, and I think we need to understand what Melissa's real agenda is, because I don't believe it's just about the condo money anymore." Jake was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the river. Finally, he turned to me, determination replacing the despair in his eyes. "You're right. If there's even a chance that this wasn't what it seemed, we need to know. But Claire..." He reached for my hand, and this time I didn't pull away. "Even if there's more to this story, it doesn't erase what happened. I still betrayed your trust. I still hurt you. And I'll spend every day making that up to you if you'll let me." I looked down at our joined hands, the familiar feel of his fingers intertwined with mine. 7 years of history, of building a life together. Was I ready to throw that away? Or was there still something worth fighting for? "I can't make any promises right now," I said honestly, "but I'm willing to look for the truth. Together." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a starting point, and for now, that would have to be enough. The next morning I returned to work, ignoring the curious glances and hushed conversations that stopped whenever I entered a room. My boss, David, called me into his office almost immediately. "Claire, good to have you back," he said, gesturing for me to sit. David was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair, and a no-nonsense management style I'd always appreciated. "Everything all right? It's not like you to miss work." "Just a personal matter," I said vaguely. "It's being handled." He nodded, not pushing for details. "Well, I wanted to let you know that we've finalised the transfer for Amber Reynolds from Denver. She'll be starting next month and working closely with your team on the Westridge account." My stomach dropped. I'd almost forgotten about Amber's impending arrival in the midst of everything else. "Is there a problem?" David asked, noticing my expression. I considered my options. I could say nothing and endure working alongside the woman who had slept with my husband. I could request to be moved to a different account, effectively damaging my career trajectory, or I could be honest. "Actually, there is," I said, straightening in my chair. I've recently learned that Ms. Reynolds had an inappropriate relationship with my husband during the Chicago conference. I don't believe we can work effectively together. David's eyebrows shot up. I see. He leaned back, processing this information. That is indeed problematic from a workplace dynamics perspective. Thank you for bringing this to my attention before it became an issue. What happens now? I asked. Leave it with me, he said. I'll speak with HR. It may be possible to reassign her to a different department, or possibly reconsider the transfer altogether. In the meantime, I'd appreciate your discretion on this matter. I left his office feeling marginally better. At least I wouldn't have to face Amber on a daily basis while trying to sort out the mess of my marriage. Back at my desk, I opened my laptop and began searching for information about the hotel in Chicago where the conference had been held. The Grand Palmer Hotel had security cameras in all public areas, according to their website. If Jake had been drugged in the bar, there might be footage. On impulse, I called the hotel directly. Grand Palmer Hotel, how may I direct your call? A polite voice answered. Hello, this is Claire Matthews from Barrett & Associates Legal Department. I lied smoothly. We had several employees stay at your hotel for a conference 4 months ago, and we're investigating a potential incident. I'm wondering about your security footage retention policy. Let me transfer you to our security office, the receptionist said. After a brief hold, a gruff male voice came on the line. Security, this is Miguel. I repeated my fabricated identity and question. We keep digital footage for 120 days before it's automatically archived and eventually deleted, Miguel informed me. After that, it requires a formal legal request or court order to retrieve. I did a quick mental calculation until the conference had been just over 110 days ago. The footage might still be accessible. Thank you, that's helpful, I said. One more question. What would be required to view footage from a specific date and location within the hotel? We'd need a formal written request on company letterhead. Specifics about the date, time and location, and a valid business reason. Or of course a police report number if it's a criminal matter. I thanked him and hung up, mind racing. Getting that footage wouldn't be easy without actual legal authority, but knowing it existed was a start. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Spoke with Amber. She claims not to remember much about that night either. Says she was really wasted. Convenient, I typed back. Hotel security footage might still exist, working on a way to access it. His response came quickly. How can I help? I'm not sure yet, still figuring it out. Also talked to my boss about Amber's transfer. He's looking into alternatives. Good. Last thing you need is to see her every day. I talked to Dad this morning, asked if he knew Melissa was in Chicago that weekend. He said she told them she was in Boston. He's as confused as we are. I was about to respond when my office phone rang. It was Megan from accounting. Claire, you're not going to believe this, she said without preamble. I just overheard a conversation between David and HR. They're cancelling Amber's transfer and investigating her for potential violations of the company ethics policy. What? Already? I was surprised at how quickly things were moving. Apparently she has a history, Megan continued, lowering her voice. This isn't the first time she's had an inappropriate relationship with a married colleague. There was an incident in the San Francisco office 2 years ago that got swept under the rug when she transferred to Denver. How do you know all this? My cubicle is right next to the HR conference room, and they don't always check if anyone's around before discussing sensitive matters. Megan had always been my best source of office gossip, but this was beyond valuable. Thanks for letting me know, I said, mind whirling with this new information. After hanging up, I sent another text to Jake. Just learned Amber has a history of affairs with married colleagues. Pattern of behaviour. Transferred from SF to Denver after a similar incident. Jake's response took longer this time. This keeps getting worse. Think Melissa knew about Amber's history somehow. It was a good question. If Melissa had orchestrated this whole thing, how would she have known about Amber's propensity for workplace affairs? Unless... I pulled up the company directory again and searched for employees in the San Francisco office. Then I checked LinkedIn for connections. It took only a few minutes to find it. a link between Melissa and the San Francisco office. 3 years ago, Melissa had worked briefly for a marketing firm that counted our San Francisco branch among its clients. She would have had contact with people who knew about the Amber situation. Found a connection, I texted Jake. Melissa worked with our SF office 3 years ago. Could have heard about Amber through that network. Jesus, came his reply. We need to talk to Melissa directly. Confront her with what we know. I hesitated. Confronting Melissa now might alert her to our suspicions before we had concrete proof. On the other hand, seeing her reaction to our questions might tell us something valuable. Not yet, I decided. Let's gather more evidence first. Can you find out if she used her credit card in Chicago that weekend? Your parents might have access to her statements if they're still helping with her bills. I'll ask Dad. He handles most of her financial stuff still. You're pretty good at this detective work, you know. Despite everything. I smiled slightly at his text. Years of tracing money for financial fraud cases. Comes in handy. By the end of the workday, I had a clearer picture forming in my mind. If my suspicions were correct, Melissa had orchestrated a sophisticated plan. She'd learned about Amber's history, arranged to be in Chicago during Jake's conference, possibly drugged him or facilitated Amber doing so, and then used the resulting affair as leverage for financial gain. When that failed, she'd opted for public humiliation instead. The question remained, why? Was it really just about the condo money? Or was there something deeper, some long-standing resentment that had finally found its outlet? As I packed up my things to leave the office, my phone rang again. It was Robert, Jake's father. Claire, he said when I answered, his voice warm but concerned. How are you holding up, sweetheart? I'm managing, I said, touched by his genuine care. Unlike Patricia, Robert had always treated me like a daughter. Jake told me about your suspicions regarding Melissa, he continued. I've been looking into some things on my end. Did you find anything? I checked our credit card statements. Patricia and I still pay Melissa's Amex bill, something we really need to stop doing at her age. Anyway, there are charges from Chicago on the exact dates of Jake's conference. The Grand Palmer Hotel bar. Room service, even a spa treatment. My heart raced. So, she definitely was there. Yes, and when I asked her about it just now, she claimed she'd changed her plans last minute and decided to treat herself to a weekend away. Said she didn't know Jake would be there for a conference, but Claire... His voice dropped lower. I also found something else concerning. A charge from an online pharmacy a week before the trip. I looked it up. It's a place that sells generic medications without requiring prescriptions, including sedatives. My blood ran cold. Robert, I think Jake may have been drugged that night. I'm afraid you might be right, he said heavily. Patricia doesn't want to believe it. She says Melissa would never do something like that to her own brother. But I've been enabling her behaviour for too long, and I'm starting to see the consequences. What do we do now? I asked. I've told Jake he needs to file a police report. If he was drugged... That's assault. The hotel might release the security footage to law enforcement, even if they won't give it to you directly. I felt a surge of gratitude toward Robert. Thank you for taking this seriously. Of course, he said. Jake made a terrible mistake, but if he was drugged, that changes things considerably. And regardless, what Melissa did at your party was unforgivable. Patricia and I are cutting her off financially, effective immediately. It's long overdue. After we hung up, I sat in my car in the office parking garage, processing everything. The pieces were falling into place, painting a disturbing picture of calculated malice. Melissa hadn't just revealed the affair, she'd engineered it from the beginning. I started the car, decision made. It was time to go home, not to my parents' house where I'd been staying, but to the home I shared with Jake. We had planning to do. I pulled into our driveway just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the front lawn. Jake's car was already there. Taking a deep breath, I gathered my courage and walked inside. The house smelled of garlic and herbs. Jake was cooking. He appeared in the hallway, spatula in hand, looking surprised and hopeful to see me. "You're here," he said simply. "I'm here," I confirmed. Your dad called me. We need to talk strategy. Relief flooded his features. I'm making pasta. Your favourite, cacio e pepe. Are you hungry? I realised I was starving, having skipped lunch in favour of my impromptu investigation. Starving, actually. We moved to the kitchen, falling into our old routine as if on autopilot. I set the table while Jake finished cooking, the familiar domesticity both comforting and painful in its reminder of what we stood to lose. Over dinner, Jake filled me in on his conversation with his father. Dad's furious. I've never heard him so angry. He's cutting Melissa off completely. No more paying her credit card bills, no more covering her rent when she's short, nothing. Mum's upset, says we're jumping to conclusions, but Dad's not backing down. Do you think Melissa will retaliate when she realises she's being cut off? I asked, twirling pasta around my fork. Almost certainly, Jake said grimly. She's not used to facing consequences. But what can she do? The worst has already happened. She exposed the affair. Not quite the worst, I pointed out. If we can prove she drugged you, she could face criminal charges. Jake set down his fork, his expression troubled. Do you think it would come to that? She's still my sister. A sister who may have drugged you, facilitated your sexual assault, tried to blackmail you, and then publicly humiliated both of us when her plan failed, I reminded him. Family doesn't do that, Jake. He was quiet for a moment. You're right. I'm just struggling to reconcile the sister I grew up with, the one who helped me build blanket forts and cried when I left for college, with someone capable of this level of calculation and cruelty. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I understand, but we need to be clear-eyed about what we're dealing with. After dinner, we moved to the living room with our laptops. Jake had filed a police report that afternoon, reporting his suspicion of being drugged. The officer had been sceptical, but took the report, assigning a case number that could be used to request the hotel security footage. The detective assigned to the case said she'd contact the hotel tomorrow, Jake explained. But she warned me not to get my hopes up. It's been 4 months, and without a toxicology report from the time of the incident, it'll be hard to prove anything. Even if we can't prove it legally, I want to know the truth, I said. For us, for our marriage. Jake looked at me, vulnerability clear in his eyes. Does that mean there's still a chance for us, that you might be able to forgive me? I chose my words carefully. I think there's a chance for us to understand what really happened and then decide where to go from there. If you were drugged, you're as much a victim as I am. That doesn't erase the pain of the betrayal, but it changes the context significantly. He nodded, accepting my cautious response. What's our next move while we wait for the police? I think we need to understand Melissa's motive better, I said. The condo money might have been the immediate goal, but this level of orchestration suggests something deeper. She's always been jealous of what I have, Jake mused. The stable job, the house, the marriage, but she's never taken actual steps to achieve those things herself. It's easier to resent others than to put in the work. Has something changed recently that might have triggered this? I asked. Any particular reason she suddenly needs $50,000 for a condo down payment? Jake thought for a moment. Actually, yes. She's been seeing someone new for the past 6 months. A guy named Eric who works in real estate development. From what I've gathered, he comes from money and runs with a wealthy crowd. I think Melissa is trying to keep up with a lifestyle she can't afford. So impressing the new boyfriend could be part of her motivation, I reasoned. Making a down payment on an upscale Hoboken condo would certainly fit that narrative. It would, Jake agreed. But why go to such extreme lengths? Why not just ask our parents directly for the money? Because they might have said no, I pointed out. They've been trying to get her to stand on her own feet. But if she could frame it as helping her brother through a crisis he created, they'd feel obligated to help, Jake finished. That makes a sick kind of sense. We spent the next few hours mapping out everything we knew, creating a timeline of events from the Chicago conference to the birthday party revelation. The more we pieced together, the more convinced I became that Melissa had orchestrated the entire situation. Around midnight, Jake's phone rang. It was his father. Dad, it's late. Is everything okay? Jake put the call on speaker so I could hear. No, everything is not okay, Robert said, his voice tense. Your mother and I just had a huge fight with Melissa. We told her we're cutting her off financially, and she completely lost it. Started screaming about how we've always favoured you, how we helped with your down payment but won't help with hers. What happened? Jake asked. She stormed out, but not before threatening to tell everyone the whole truth if we don't reconsider. I'm not sure what she meant by that, but it didn't sound good. I exchanged a worried glance with Jake. Robert, did she say anything specific about what this truth might be? No, she was too angry to be coherent. Patricia is beside herself, blaming me for pushing Melissa too far. He sighed heavily. I just wanted to warn you both. I think Melissa might be planning something else. After we hung up, a tense silence filled the room. What do you think she meant? Jake finally asked. What truth could she possibly reveal that's worse than what she's already done? I shook my head, uncertain. I don't know. But I'm starting to think we shouldn't wait for the police to move at their pace. We need to be proactive. What are you suggesting? A plan was forming in my mind. Risky, potentially, but direct. I think I should talk to Melissa myself. Woman to woman. See if I can get her to reveal something incriminating. Jake looked alarmed. That's too dangerous. If she drugged me, who knows what she might do to you? I'm not suggesting meeting her alone in a dark alley, I clarified. Somewhere public with plenty of witnesses, and I'd record the conversation. I don't like it, Jake said, running a hand through his hair. But I don't have a better idea. Just promise me you'll be careful. I nodded, already composing a text message to Melissa in my head. It was time to take control of this situation and fight for my marriage, not just against external threats, but against my own doubts and pain as well. Whatever truth Melissa was threatening to reveal, I was determined to uncover it first. The next day was Saturday. I texted Melissa asking to meet for coffee, suggesting we needed to talk about Jake and the family situation. To my surprise, she'd agreed readily, even suggesting her favourite cafe in Hoboken, an upscale place near the waterfront where she'd been apartment hunting. I arrived early, selecting a table in the corner that offered privacy for conversation, but was still within view of other patrons. I'd dressed carefully, professional but approachable, an armour of normalcy in a situation that was anything but normal. My phone was in my pocket, the recording app already activated. New Jersey was a one-party consent state for recordings, meaning I could legally record our conversation without telling her. Melissa arrived 10 minutes late, making an entrance as she always did. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her designer sunglasses pushed up on her head, her handbag probably worth more than my monthly car payment. She spotted me and approached, her expression a careful mask of casual indifference. Claire, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. I was surprised to hear from you. I figured you'd never want to speak to me again after the party. I considered that option, I said evenly, but there are things we need to discuss. She signalled to a barista, ordering a complicated latte without bothering to look at the menu. I already had a simple black coffee in front of me. So, she said when her order had been placed, what's so important that you wanted to meet? Come to beg me not to tell everyone more about Jake's extracurricular activities? I studied her face, looking for signs of the calculation I now suspected lay beneath her every action. Actually, I wanted to talk about Chicago. A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, or wariness, crossed her features before she composed them again. Chicago? What about it? You were there during Jake's conference. The same weekend he allegedly had the affair with Amber. Melissa shrugged, but her shoulders were tense. So, it's a free country. I can go wherever I want. Of course you can, I agreed pleasantly. It's just interesting that you told your parents you were in Boston that weekend, and that you happened to be at the exact same hotel as Jake's conference, and that you never mentioned running into your brother while you were there. The barista arrived with Melissa's elaborate drink, providing her a moment to gather herself. She took a sip, leaving a perfect lipstick mark on the rim. I changed my plans last minute, she said dismissively, and I didn't run into Jake. It's a big hotel. That's odd, because there are photos from the conference where you're clearly visible in the background, At the hotel bar where Jake was drinking before he went upstairs with Amber. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Are you accusing me of something, Claire? I'm just trying to understand the sequence of events, I said, maintaining my calm demeanour. Jake doesn't remember much from that night, says he felt unusually dizzy after just a few drinks, almost like he'd been drugged. Melissa let out a sharp laugh. Typical. He cheats, then tries to claim he wasn't responsible. The alcohol made me do it, I was drugged. Pathetic excuses. Interestingly, your credit card shows a charge from an online pharmacy that sells sedatives without prescriptions just a week before the Chicago trip. This time, Melissa couldn't hide her reaction. She paled visibly, her fingers tightening around her cup. You've been looking at my credit card statements? That's an invasion of privacy. Your father has been paying your bills, I reminded her. He has every right to review the statements, just like he has every right to stop supporting a 29-year-old woman who should be supporting herself. Anger flashed in her eyes. Of course you'd say that. You've been turning my parents against me from day one. Little Miss Perfect with her respectable job and her mortgage and her responsible life. You have no idea what it's like to compete with that. Is that what this is about? Competition? I leaned forward. You orchestrated my husband's sexual assault because you're jealous of our life together. Sexual assault? She scoffed. Please. Jake wanted it. He'd been flirting with Amber all evening. I just helped things along. The admission hung in the air between us. I felt a cold satisfaction. I'd gotten what I came for, a confession of sorts, mixed with horror at the callousness of her actions. So you did drug him, I said quietly. Realising her mistake, Melissa backtracked quickly. I didn't say that. You're twisting my words. What exactly did you do, Melissa? Put something in his drink? Encourage Amber to do it? Watch while your own brother was incapacitated and taken advantage of? You don't understand anything, she hissed, leaning closer. Jake has always had everything handed to him. The golden child. The successful son. Mum and Dad paid for his college, helped with his down payment, supported his career choices. Meanwhile, I'm treated like a perpetual disappointment. When I needed money for the condo, just once, just one thing for me, they hesitated. Said I should learn financial responsibility first, as if Jake had to prove himself before they helped him. So you decided to punish him. And me along with him? I decided to create some leverage, she corrected, her voice cold. If Jake had just convinced our parents to give me the down payment like he was supposed to, none of this would have happened. The affair would have remained our little secret. Blackmail, in other words. She shrugged again, some of her confidence returning. Call it what you want, family helping family. But Jake didn't hold up his end of the bargain. He kept stalling, saying he was trying to find the right moment to talk to Mum and Dad. I got tired of waiting. So you humiliated us both at my birthday party. It seemed fitting. You always have to be the centre of attention, the perfect daughter-in-law. I thought you should know what your husband is really like when you're not around. I took a deep breath, controlling the anger that threatened to overwhelm me. What Jake is really like is someone who was drugged and assaulted. Thanks to his sister's manipulation. That's a criminal offence, Melissa. Sexual assault facilitated by drugging, blackmail. These are serious crimes. For the first time, uncertainty crept into her expression. You can't prove anything. We've filed a police report. They're retrieving the hotel security footage. Your credit card statements show the pharmacy purchase. Amber has a history of similar incidents that creates a pattern. And now I have this conversation. I touched my pocket where my phone was recording. New Jersey is a one-party consent state for recordings. Everything you've just admitted is legally admissible. The colour drained from her face. You're bluffing. Am I? I stood up, gathering my purse. I guess we'll find out. Oh, and you should know, your parents aren't just cutting you off temporarily. Robert is removing you from their will. All those assets you've been counting on inheriting someday, they'll be going to charity instead. This was a bluff. Robert had said nothing about changing his will, but the look of horror on Melissa's face told me it had hit home. You can't do this, she said, her voice shaking. "You're trying to turn my whole family against me." "You did that yourself," I replied calmly. "Actions have consequences, Melissa. It's time you learned that." As I walked away, I heard her call after me. "This isn't over, Claire. I still have things I can reveal, things that would destroy Jake's precious reputation completely." I didn't turn back. Whatever additional threats she was making, they were likely empty, the desperate lashing out of someone who was finally facing accountability for her actions. Outside, I stopped to breathe in the crisp autumn air, feeling strangely light despite the ugliness of the confrontation. I pulled out my phone. Checking that the recording had worked, it had, capturing every damning word. I texted Jake. Got what we needed. Melissa essentially admitted everything. Heading home now, we should call the detective with the new evidence. His reply came immediately. "Thank God. Are you okay?" "I am," I wrote back and realised it was true. Not completely healed, not by a long shot. But for the first time since the birthday party, I felt like we had a path forward. The truth was coming to light, and with it, the possibility of rebuilding what had been broken. 2 weeks later, we gathered in Robert and Patricia's elegant colonial home in Montclair for what promised to be an uncomfortable family meeting. The detective assigned to Jake's case had reviewed our evidence, the credit card statements, the recording of my conversation with Melissa, and most damning of all, the recovered hotel security footage showing Melissa clearly tampering with Jake's drink when he stepped away from the bar. Charges were pending. But before proceeding further, Robert had insisted on this family intervention. One last chance for Melissa to take responsibility and agree to get help, potentially in exchange for a reduced sentence. Patricia had been in denial at first, unable to accept that her daughter could do something so calculated and harmful. But faced with the irrefutable evidence, even she had finally acknowledged the truth. Melissa sat stiffly on the couch, looking trapped. Her boyfriend Eric had broken up with her once he learned of the potential criminal charges. Apparently, his interest had waned once it became clear she wouldn't be getting the money for the Hoboken condo. Robert stood in the centre of the living room, his normally jovial face solemn. "Melissa, we're here because we love you, but we cannot condone or enable what you've done. The detective has agreed to recommend a plea deal that would include mandatory psychiatric treatment instead of jail time, but only if you take full responsibility and commit to getting help." "This is ridiculous," Melissa muttered, though her usual defiance seemed subdued. "You're all so eager to believe the worst of me." "We've seen the evidence," Patricia said, her voice strained. "The footage from the hotel bar shows you putting something in Jake's drink. How can you possibly explain that?" Melissa fell silent, her gaze fixed on the Persian rug beneath her feet. Jake, sitting beside me on the love seat, spoke next. "I want to understand why, Melissa. We grew up together. We were close once. What happened that made you hate me this much?" For a moment it seemed she wouldn't answer. Then, in a small voice that reminded me of a child caught in wrongdoing, she said, "You made it all look so easy." "What did?" Jake asked. "Everything. School, career, finding Claire, buying a house. You always knew exactly what you wanted and exactly how to get it. You never seemed to doubt yourself or struggle or fail." She looked up, tears in her eyes. "Do you have any idea what it's like living in that shadow? Being compared to you at every turn? Why can't you be more like Jake? Why don't you have your life together like your brother does?" The room was silent as we absorbed her words. There was a grain of truth there. Jake had always been the more directed of the siblings, while Melissa floundered. "That's not a justification for what you did," Robert said finally. "Many people grow up feeling overshadowed by siblings without resorting to criminal behaviour." "I know," Melissa whispered, a tear tracking down her cheek. "I don't know what's wrong with me. I just get so angry sometimes, thinking about how unfair everything is. And then I do things I know I shouldn't do." Patricia moved to sit beside her daughter, taking her hand. "This is why we want you to get help, sweetheart. This pattern of behaviour, it's not normal, and it's not who you were meant to be." For the first time, I felt a flicker of pity for Melissa. Not enough to excuse her actions, but enough to see her as a deeply troubled person, rather than a monster. The plea deal requires you to enter an intensive psychiatric treatment program, Robert explained. It would mean 3 months of inpatient care, followed by ongoing therapy. You'd be on probation for 2 years. But you'd avoid jail time, and this wouldn't permanently destroy your future. What about money? Melissa asked, ever practical even in crisis. How am I supposed to pay rent while I'm in treatment for 3 months? We'll cover your rent during treatment, Robert said, but after that you need to support yourself. We'll help you find a job once you're stable, but the days of unlimited financial support are over. It's not healthy for any of us. Melissa nodded slowly, seeming to deflate as the fight left her. I'll take the deal, she said quietly. I don't want to go to jail. The relief in the room was palpable. No one wanted to see Melissa incarcerated, despite her actions. This solution offered accountability, while also addressing the underlying issues that had led to her behaviour. As we prepared to leave, Melissa pulled me aside in the hallway. Jake watched tensely from a distance, clearly concerned about leaving us alone together. I'm sorry, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. I never thought about how it would hurt you. I was only thinking about Jake, and my parents, and how unfair everything seemed. Actions have consequences, I said, repeating what I'd told her at the cafe. Sometimes those consequences affect people you never intended to hurt. She nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. Are you and Jake... will you stay together? It was the question I'd been asking myself for weeks. The truth about the affair had changed things significantly. Jake hadn't chosen to betray me. He'd been drugged and victimised. But the experience had still revealed fractures in our relationship that needed addressing. We're working on it, I said honestly, taking it day by day. She accepted this with another nod, before Patricia led her away to discuss the logistics of the treatment programme. In the car driving home, Jake and I were quiet, processing the emotional weight of the meeting. Do you think she'll actually change? Jake finally asked. Get better? I don't know, I admitted. It depends on whether she's genuinely committed to the process or just trying to avoid jail. But the fact that she apologised, that seems like a positive sign. He reached over and took my hand. What about us? Are we going to be okay? I looked at our intertwined fingers, thinking about everything we'd been through. The betrayal that wasn't really a betrayal. The investigation that had brought us together as a team again. The slow rebuilding of trust. I think we will, I said, but we have work to do too. The affair may not have been your choice, but it exposed issues we need to address. The distance that had grown between us. The communication that had broken down. The way we'd started taking each other for granted. I know, he agreed solemnly, and I want to do that work. I almost lost you. Claire, I never want to come that close again. As we pulled into our driveway, I thought about the birthday party that had started it all, how what should have been a celebration had instead become the catalyst for the most challenging period of our marriage, but perhaps in a strange way it had also been necessary. A painful but ultimately valuable wake-up call. We should go away for a weekend, Jake suggested as we entered the house. Somewhere quiet where we can really talk. Maybe that B&B in Vermont we liked last fall. I smiled, feeling a warmth that had been absent for weeks. I'd like that. A fresh start. Later that night, as we lay in bed, I reflected on how quickly life can change, how a single event can alter the course of multiple lives. Melissa's actions had nearly destroyed my marriage, but they'd also led to her finally getting the help she needed. The exposure had been painful, but perhaps necessary. What are you thinking about? Jake asked, sensing my contemplation. Just that life rarely turns out the way we expect, I said. Sometimes the worst moments lead to necessary changes. He pulled me closer, and I let myself relax into his embrace. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend overnight. But that night, for the first time since the party, I felt the possibility of complete healing, not just for my marriage, but for myself. The sister-in-law I never imagined would do what she did at my surprise birthday party had changed everything. But in the end, perhaps she'd also inadvertently given us a gift, the opportunity to rebuild something stronger than what had existed before. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.